following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Question: who is lying to you today? The media? Social media? Big business? Politicians? Actually, it's probably all of them. That led me to create this podcast named They're All Lying to Us. We do research and present findings and opinions on political, social, and cultural topics to inform our communities about what's really going on. You know, stuff that affects everyday American life. We also invite you to share your voice and help us recreate real-life interactions as they were had in the pre-digital era. I'm your host for these conversations. My name is Andy. Welcome aboard, everybody. Today is September 12th. Right after September 11th, and the memorial of that ugly Memorial Day, and the day before Friday the 13th, one of those rarities of the calendar. So hopefully everybody is not going to cross into a black cat's path, or hopefully the immigrants next door won't be eating that cat. In any event, wanted to talk today a little bit about what's going on since the last time we met a couple weeks ago. Starting around, of course, what else? The lead story of the universe right now, which is the presidential election. And a couple nights ago, we had a little debate between Kamala and Donald. And the one thing I really wanted to get into about this, again, the podcast being They're All Lying to Us. And you can find us and our other podcasts at lyingtous.com. Is kind of the two different universes. A little bit last time we talked a little bit about the two different sides of the political equation and how the extremes look at the other as this existential threat. If Comrade Kamala becomes the next president, then it could be the end of the American life as we know it. And the other side looks at if authoritarian Donald gets elected, it could be the end of democracy and constitutional way of government as we know it. So two differing views of the universe. And when you go into the debates, I think you start to see some of these hints that the two different sides are also talking from two different angles, complete two different lines of thinking, which all lead to this American division that we tend to see when it comes to political elections. And the greatest example was, which a lot of people have had some fun with, was the reference that Donald Trump made to the Haitian immigrants in a town called Springfield, Ohio, which every time anybody says Springfield, the only thing I can think about is The Simpsons. And it's not the same town, I don't think. And I don't think they have a nuclear plant in their backyards, but they do have a lot of immigrants, particularly from Haiti, apparently, that have come to their small city, and they've sort of been inundated with them. Anyways, during the debate, Trump starts talking about this story that apparently emanated somewhere in the media, social media, or what have you, I hadn't heard about because apparently I'm not in those bubbles and that information feed. But he talks about it as if it's normal, as if it's fact, that the Haitian immigrants are stealing people's dogs and cats and eating them. So a little bit of an odd story. Turned out to be likely not true, that this was going on in Springfield, Ohio. I hope I got that name right. That it wasn't going on. But I think Trump's kind of in this universe where he's talking to people who hear it the same way. And you all probably know from your experiences how if I watch stories on my shows, I'll talk to one group of people, or shows that I commonly watch to, or news outlets that I commonly watch. And I try to be, as much as possible, to get a little bit of a sampling, at least all of them. So you talk to somebody and you hear a line of thinking, and you pretty much know that that's probably an MSNBC person. And then you hear another group of stories and you hear things and you're thinking, yeah, that sounds like something I hear on Fox News that gets repeated, kind of those talking points that get disseminated. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that also goes through their social media feeds, through X, through Facebook, TikTok for the younger folks mostly. And all those feeds kind of, create these channels, and they help feed this division of the two different groups looking at the universe differently. And I think that was kind of what was going on with Trump. He thought it was probably common knowledge from the folks he's been talking to and people in that universe that, oh, everybody's heard about the people who are eating the cats and dogs, the immigrants that are doing that. And it was kind of normal to him. And of course, Kamala's looking at him like he's crazy. And I think a lot of people thought, well, that's was a little bit, the majority of people thought it was a little bit weird too. And then it turns out it was disproved as an actual fact. And again, it just comes back to that with two different universes of ways of looking at things. And I think a big part of that, beyond where we actively go to consume media, is the fact that the media and our feeds that we're getting through our computers, through our smartphones, through social media, through all of those outlets, and our marketing as well, and through television, because now a lot of streaming television and things like that, and if you stream radio or TV to your phone or any programming to your phone, you'll get ads that may very well fit you. I could be looking up a new pair of sneakers today. Oh, sneakers that help my feet not hurt. And then all of a sudden I'll be hearing the ad about it on a radio show or a podcast that I listen to on my phone, or it'll come up on a cable channel that I'm watching. And we're all being tracked and pushed that way. And of course, the algorithms of social media push us into these bubbles, and they keep on feeding us the same stories that we consume. And those stories can pull us a little bit. They try to pull us a little bit further and further to the side, and we get sort of end up with this great American divide. And I guess my question for today that I want to talk to when I bring in our producer Rich is it just two sides of the equation that we have? Or, I mean, obviously in politics, we're sort of stuck with a binary choice between Republican, Democrat, right and left. And I just, and I know that division bothers me, because I think being a member of what I consider myself to be sort of the political center, I, with a slight left lean on most issues. I I feel like even the folks that I know who are consuming this information on the right, and they'll blurt out some Fox News or this oddball things about migrants eating pets or what have you. And but when I talk to them about policy things, like, or what have you, or just communicate with them, it's like I feel like we're more closer to the center than that. And I can't escape the thought that we have these two different flows of information that are pushing this division. And I'm just wondering, Rich, what do you think? Is it again, politics is binary pretty much in this country, so you got to choose one or the other. But is it that, or is the sophistication of how the algorithms work and feed us information beyond the choices we make when we tune into a program or listen to a podcast, for example? They're all lying to us. The name of the show is in large part talking about that manipulation that we're undergoing by the age of digital surveillance, and how messaging and everything like that is being pushed to us and pushes us further apart. Is it really just two kind of primary lines, and then there's a bunch of sublines to that, or is there something more, or am I missing the point on this?
Um,
Or does it matter?
so so the way I look at all this stuff is, people talk about the bias of the media and all those things, and we're so diverse in terms of where we're getting our information from, where I'm watching Fox, or you see that chart that they come up with every year about bias in the media, and it's which is the most central, whether it's NPR or the Washington Post or whatever. And it's funny because then you back up into like the 80s and the 70s, when people watched Walter Cronkite or David Brinkley, and that's where you got your news, and you read the newspaper, and maybe you listened to the radio, and that, or you got Newsweek magazine. And I'm sure that those publications and broadcasts were slanted. They were all pretty relatively close to center. There weren't a lot of extremes. Then you get to obviously the 70s and you had protests, and that's when you started to get a lot of new media. People started to, started their own, magazines, and those things started to grow, Rolling Stone and those kinds of things. So I think we've been moving towards this separation of everybody always blames cable news, but it started long before that in my mind. And we all started to kind of pick and choose where we wanted to get our information. And then the internet comes out and then your chat rooms and all those things. And to me, that has led to, a lot of disinformation. So like to stay with that Haitian situation, it's funny because there's a lot of things that have happened in that community that have not been reported on widely. The fear of an immigrant community moving into your town. You and I are from Niagara Falls, and I can tell you stories of the 1920s and the 1930s of immigrants moving to the city of Niagara Falls and the way they were treated and discouraged from going to schools. And in communities across this country, when Native Americans would enter public high school, in elementary school, middle school, things like that, and then they were essentially encouraged and pushed out of schools because they were Native American. So there's this fear of immigrants that goes back to the 1800s, and and it's just sad. And then like the Springfield Jazz Festival last year, there was literally photographs of guys wearing red, carrying swastikas and rifles, walking with masks. I've seen the footage of the Jazz Festival, of this group of 12 men walking around, looked like they were men, intimidating people at that event. And it's just like, there's a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of fear. And unfortunately, I don't see where we're going to get resolution to these things. There isn't, I don't see where solutions are going to come from.
Yeah, I mean, it was a strange way to bring up what probably is a important topic, because what I understand it is small city of Springfield has been inundated
Like 60,000 people or
just
something
6,000
like
people, and
that.
it's been inundated with like 20,000 Haitian immigrants. Now, the Haitian immigrants come in under the guise of protection because there's been civil unrest in Haiti, and having familiarity with immigration law, they're
Right.
admitted in based on that, in something that's called TPS, or temporary protected status, which basically does give them legal authorization to be here.
Yep.
I'm curious as to how so many of them ended up in one community. That's just
I was trying to Google that myself to try to get an
it's an
understanding of
odd.
that. I know, like in Niagara Falls, when I was a school teacher, after the Haiti hurricane, I don't remember what year it was, that we had a huge influx of Haitian families that moved to Niagara Falls, and they obviously all came to our schools. But it wasn't 20,000, but it was probably a couple thousand.
Yeah,
And because we had a ton of kids enter our schools, and they acclimated, and everybody, and I was very proud of that, of those moments. Like, because Niagara Falls is a pretty diverse population nowadays, so most of us were like, oh, okay, there's just, we have such a
right.
collection of people from all over the world, and it's easier for like a city like Niagara Falls to absorb those types of immigrants, because we're already a diverse population. I think that, a lot of towns across this country don't know what to do when they're meeting people that don't look like them. And I don't mean I don't think it's necessarily racist. I think
But
it's
20,000 of anybody coming
yeah, like
to a
how
town of that
how
size.
that was determined. Yes, how that was determined. I guess I haven't found that answer either.
I don't know. It could have been accidental. Now, in the case of like refugee or asylee resettlement, that's typically done via, when it's done the right way, which meaning like, where we've taken on some of the African
Right.
the Sudanese and those countries and things like that who had civil wars and things like that, or if we took on Syrian refugees after their civil war with ISIS and everything like that going on there, the Aleppo, people remember the name of that town that was decimated. Those groups entered structural resettlement programs, and
Right.
many of them ended up in these places where, sometimes they might end up in a place in Kansas where Kansas said, we need people. We're not, so too many of our people are leaving for bigger cities or what have you. And we
Right.
need kind of an influx of population to backfill and to do those things. They actually asked for them. I mean, you
And if
look
you have
at places.
industry, farming, things like that,
Yeah,
farming
exactly. Where
corporations are
there's a
looking for
need.
labor,
Yep.
so that's definitely a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you go to, I mean, the places like where there's a huge Arab population, that's been more just a tradition outside of Detroit and Dearborn, Michigan.
Right.
And they actually, of course, they have a congressional representative that represents who is, I think, of Palestinian descent, and
Right.
that was more over a longer period of time where people went from those places went there because of the fact that they had family and because there was a community that they could easily fit into and was more familiar to them, and give them a chance to kind of meld into America gradually, but still have some of the old country back with them. In the case of around Minneapolis, St. Paul, there is a large contingent of Somalians, and I believe again there's another congressional representative who represents that area now. But there was a huge group. I was shocked, kind of surprised years ago. I didn't even realize it so much. A few years ago when I went to Minnesota, and you go to the Mall America, and there's all kind of people in their Native American garb and headdress and
Right.
stuff like that. There was a lot of the Somalian population there. It's a pretty significant contingent, and I think that after some of those things that happened, I believe, was in the '90s. There was a large amount of migration that went there, but some of it was by design. So I don't
Right.
know exactly how this Haitian thing happened
Right.
to go there. I don't know that doesn't seem like the town asked for it,
No,
and I just
I don't know.
we
The
don't
the
know.
problem is that it's like, and this is the problem that when it comes down to it, is that the debate is an opportunity in my mind for these candidates, whether it's the local mayor debate, whether it's the federal, like it's the mayor, it's the governor, it's the presidential debates. This is your opportunity to tell me and debate what you're planning to do. What are you doing about the economy? What are you doing about healthcare? What are you doing about the border? And it end up being like these weird things that we're talking about that
Right.
I felt like I got a lot of information, for the most part, but not a lot. I got enough information from the Democrats, from the Democratic candidate Harris, about what she wants to do. Some of it I already kind of knew. A lot of it was just a retread. But my favorite moment was like, like they tried to the moderators at times, not always, but the moderators tried to ask, I thought, relatively good questions and tried to focus on some policy questions, not all of them, but like Trump just couldn't focus. Like he couldn't, like he went down this thing about healthcare, and he was like, you were president for 4 years, and you're like, you never came out with a healthcare proposal. You kept saying you were going to do it. And now you've been like off for 4 years. And then they asked him about what he was going to do about healthcare. And he's like, well, I'm not the president. So once I'm the president, maybe I'll come up with a plan. I'm like, you were president last time and you didn't come up with a plan. So you have no plan. Like it's kind of like, I don't know, like it's like going to a job interview and saying, like, what do you want to do in our corporation? Like, well, I don't know, just give me a job and then I'll figure out what department I want to work in, what I'm going to work on. Like, no, that's not how like job interviews work. Like,
Right.
you should tell me why you want the job. And it was like, well, I'll tell you if you give me the job back, then I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Like,
Reveal what's behind door
and then,
number
like,
two.
where she said, and even it was like, well, like, and she has changed. She admitted she had changed her opinion before she wanted universal health care. And she says she's moved towards a more mixed program because she recognized the writing on the wall that people don't want to give up their private health care, but they don't necessarily begrudge other people for having access to a universal health care. So, but I don't want to give up my quality health care that my employer might be giving me. There should be options. And I thought that she had a good answer for that. So most of us, like, I don't know. Like, I guess the question is, I don't know if people want that, because that's boring. They're probably more excited about, Taylor Swift endorsing Kamala Harris and, other people making goofy comments about that. I feel like we're still interested in the, like the silly stuff. That's what hits the general conversation, not like content and what's important.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much true. And like going back to that division issue, the debate are both sides kind of talking to two different people, two different groups of people when they're talking about things. And one group is, the one group is already, well, we're content with just, Trump throwing out, spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. And then the other side is, likes that, okay, well, Kamala has at least a plan and she sounds familiar with the issues, but the other side doesn't give a shit. They're already in that line where they're just comfortable with it. And again, the other part about these debates is, I don't know what the percentage is, but 80 to 90% of people probably already have their mind made up of, which one they're going to vote for.
Right.
So it's really just a staged event. And I was impressed by it. I saw one statistic that said, and the people talking about it on the tube didn't think that it was that big of a deal. I thought it was significant that the people who had a more favorable impression among independents, who had a more favorable impression of Kamala, like she gained like 20 points before and after the debate.
And I think that's
Trump gained like 2 points. You went from like 25 to 40 something, and he went from 25 to 27.
I must have saw something very similar to what you said, because I saw the same thing. And to me, like, you're not, that debate did not pick up any new Trump supporters, but I think that debate, a lot of people were more likely to support Harris. So that's the net positive.
And probably the bigger net positive was when Taylor Swift came out afterwards and said,
well,
vote, vote for Kamala.
And I will say, like, I have a weird interest in Taylor Swift and I don't like her music necessarily. Ironically, I've actually listened. I have a former student that I'm very close with, and she's a huge Taylor Swift fan. And we talk all the time about, like, Taylor Swift more as the entity as opposed to the artist. And I've listened to some of her music and not the main stuff. I think she's actually a very talented writer. I like some of her non-popular, like less popular stuff. She's got a very interesting philosophy. I think but I really was impressed with her endorsement, because it really wasn't like, I think Kamala Harris is great because she's a woman. I think it really was like about, the culture that changed that she would bring, about it. I was more impressed with why she was more interested in having Kamala be president, not just because she's a woman or not because
she had a little bit of policy and approach was.
Yes. And I was like, okay.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that was why it was cool, as opposed to just like a celebrity coming out on the Republic, like, and mad that, like some of the people that came out and supported Trump at the convention, or that have done that. It was kind of weird. To me, that was kind of like a weird kind of approach to it. I found like that Democrats are more likely to criticize their candidate if they don't think, like, there's a lot of Democrats that are frustrated by Harris, that she's not distancing herself from Biden, or that she has not done enough interviews. And this is from Democrats, relatively extreme Democrats, a little bit more to the left, that want her to come out and be stronger on certain things, where Trump supporters are just happy with him to just, say the same stuff. and whether like tariffs, yeah, we're going to tax, England when they send products over here. And I'm like, yes, you will pay for that. Like that English corporation's not going to be like, oh, well, we're not going to make as much money this year because Trump's giving us a tariff. Like, please go back to high school and take, your senior year of economics again. No tariff has ever been paid by anyone except the purchaser of the product. It all gets trickled down to the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Like there's no example ever you can find except maybe in maybe the 1700s, but it's in modern society.
When the Indians sold Manhattan.
Yeah, right. Like I can't think of a situation where a tariff actually did. I mean, it's no different than his tariff is no different from the Mexicans are going to pay for the wall, and they didn't.
Right.
And we're
now they're going to have to figure out how to get him to pay for this his massive deportation program.
Especially that's the funny thing. Like that was another thing that came up in debate when he talked about the deportation. He didn't really ever answer how he would do it. He said, well, the local police are going to do it. Like, so you're going to give an executive order as the president to a local government, what the local police, like, I'm sorry, that's never going to happen. First of all, they don't have
an unfinanced mandate.
They don't have the resources to do it. And if they do go knock down a door and take somebody, where are they putting this person or this family? Like, are they separating the families? Like what, like but he doesn't, it just sounds good. And I think if the Democrats have been more critical of Biden and Harris's plan because they felt it was too centrist, it was too much of what Republicans want to do to immigrants. So I do like at least, and again, I'm not a member of any party, but I tend to at least respect the fact that there are also people that think Harris is just great with everything she does, but there seems to be more Democrats that are willing to question Harris's motives on Palestine, on immigration, on other things. Versus that, I feel like Trump supporters tend to be like, yeah, he's right about everything. Like they don't seem to question him very much.
Yeah. It's, if we look at that division between, is there two groups of people and are they being fed, pushed further to the extreme? I guess in general, I believe that the Republican conservative supporters tend to be what I call more believers.
Okay.
And right, which, if you consider the large Christian contingency in their group, believer is a good adjective. And they don't, and faith as part of belief, as their belief system, is in the unseen and the unknown is really part of what they do. So when they buy in, and questioning it, kind of like being in the Catholic Church, as I think we both were, questioning it is not a valued thing in that group. Whereas on the Democrat side, they tend to be more the over analyzers. Overthinkers, the chronic overthinkers of these things, and they are in this old Greek style, battle to look for the truth, and this quest for truth and justice and fairness and equality. And when it's equality, it's got to, if there isn't equality, damn it, somebody's got to come in and force equality down everybody's fucking throat. It's two different universes. It's the believer and and almost the Democrats are almost a little bit of the dreamer, because so they're a little bit untethered from reality as well.
Yeah, they don't understand the concept. Many of them don't understand the concept of compromise. That you just because you win an election doesn't mean you get everything you want
on both sides.
It's not Christmas morning because you won the election. You may not get the Lego Star Wars Death Star, that my son wanted because
really
it was $300. Just so you know, he still harasses me that he didn't get the Lego Death Star. When and I'm like, you know what, you have a job now. You can buy the Lego Death Star yourself. But I have a very good friend, very old friend, who is very, very, very Christian and very, very religious. And I respect him immensely. He's an incredibly special person. However, he supports Donald Trump. And I said to him, I don't understand how, given a lot of and he believes that some of the things that Trump has done that he is guilty of. He believes that he probably did a sexually assault someone, maybe not necessarily that person, but I believe that he probably has sexually assaulted people. And he certainly believes that Trump has been divorced multiple times. And he also thinks that he's a bit of an embezzler, but he's willing to support Donald Trump totally under because of one topic, and that's abortion. Because he's so anti-choice and abortion that he's willing to overlook everything else that Trump does. Now, I realize that's a very small percentage of our population, but that is very Christian understanding. And I'm like, I just have never, you've got to, like, I don't care what who you are, if you're extreme right, extreme left, you cannot, I just think that having one topic and you're not looking at the bigger picture is just so short-sighted in terms of really understanding what's best for your country. Like you can't be one topic. Like you just can't be one topic. Like,
Yeah, it's a tough one out there, but like I said, in the profiles, like you said, I think that maybe that kind of dichotomy that I explained helps understand why you might see the Democrats be more critical and the Republicans be less critical of their own candidate. I don't know, but again, all of these, and part of the problem with all these things is that finding the truth between in any of this stuff, and truth, I think, is an overused term by the people who are smarter than me and talk about these things. And Donald Trump has a problem with the truth and stuff like that. I really think that truth is less. There are very few things you can point to and say this is an absolute truth. There's very few things that fit into that category. However, we have such varied stories and untruths and things that shape opinion and are being driven through these media channels to individuals to skew their opinion. And it's a major effort to sift through this crap to find what the real truth is. Like that, I mean, it would take an effort to go and see what's the real situation in Springfield, Ohio.
Right.
What is the real reality of it there, right?
And you could go there and talk to somebody and still, you could actually go and see it for yourself, and
Right.
you may not know the actual answer. Like,
Right.
just because you interview somebody, well, I saw somebody and my cousin saw a guy in the park and he like grabbed a goose, but and that's one of the stories that's out there. Well, and then another guy said, well, I knew somebody, and like in the he abused a cat, and that's where a lot of this supposedly started from. These homogenation of different stories that are floating around. It's yes, you're right. Like there aren't a lot of things that you can say, well, that is absolute. And even when there are those things that should be absolute, there seems to still be people that are willing to say, but it's not. Like even though there's a ton of evidence to support that thing, there's always going to be like that weird percentage of people to say, well, it's just not true. And if you say to them, well, but what evidence would you accept? And they're like, well, if you tell me this, I'm like, okay, well, here's the evidence. Well, I still don't believe it. Well, then I'm done with you, because, and I have had that conversation with people about a couple conspiracy theories out there. And I'm like, you pick something and let me try to come back with you on it. And it was we didn't go to the moon thing. And I, had 4 different things that I said, well, what about this? He goes, well, I still don't believe that we went to the moon, even though like there were 4 things that I said, well, look at this evidence and look at this explanation. And they were all credible. And he said they were credible. He's like, but I still don't think we went to the moon. I just don't trust the government.
Well,
so
it's like,
I'm done with this conversation with you, because like, it doesn't matter what I present. You're not willing to like open your mind to other ideas because you've decided that you're just bought in on it. It's They're like Buffalo Bills fans. They think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. And I'm like, I just don't see what evidence tells me that. I mean, you can
It's
be a
see,
fan,
but
but like,
that's when I would talk to the religious person,
yes,
people in
just
church
have
and stuff
faith.
like that, and
Yeah.
church was a place where it's like, well, you can't really express doubt about the existence of God and all these other things, and you can't, and then you go, and you can't, well, the stories about Jesus, you can't really contest those things, and then us cynics out there go watch The Life of Brian or something like that, and we tend to think like, yeah, these people were not sophisticated and they were seeing things maybe the way they want to. And you ask them, like, well, how do you know that there's really a God out there? um
Yeah.
and they just say, well, you got to have faith. That's why they call it faith. And I'm like, okay,
I was,
I'm
as you
sorry.
know,
I'm sorry to be
yeah,
a little bit more questioning that,
yeah.
but I can think it's a possibility, but I can't go forward to anybody else and say it with 100% certainty that it
Sure.
exists, and certainly that the God and religion exists in the way, that it all exists in the way that it's been portrayed in traditional, in this example,
Well, you
Christianity.
and I happen to be born in a Christian country, so we just coincidentally turned out that our religion happens to be the right one. Like that's an interesting take on religion in general. That like so the guy in Japan that was actually well that's and there are thoughts within certain Christianity like well that's why we have to have the Crusades. And I'm like well that was a terrible
Missions,
idea. Like
missions.
in missions and stuff to show the world that they were wrong, like show those people that they're wrong. And I'm like, but
And that's why
so you
America's
have
winning. That's why
you're right.
America's
You
winning.
were born in France, but everybody else was wrong. Like it's just so. And then you even like when you get into religions because it's the same thing. It's like, well, yeah, but your religion was a different religion, and your guys got mad at the other guys running the religion, so you quit and started your own. Like that's where a lot of religions came from. I'm like, well, so then you'll get into well, but the Holy Spirit. I'm like, okay, well, all right, well, the guiding us. So and it's hard, and it's the same thing as I said a few minutes ago. Religion and politics are very similar in terms of you're a true believer in these things, and sometimes it's hard to have a reasonable discussion because people are so married to their beliefs, whether it's political or religious or just ideology in general, that they don't want to be challenged on it, and then they tend to go look for those things, whether it's on X or Instagram, Facebook, TV channel, newspaper, radio, whatever that supports them.
And once they
That
find it, they'll keep feeding it to them.
yeah, because they're just going to surround themselves with people that agree with them because maybe it's too hard. And I think I've blocked some people because I just can't stand what they post, and but I do think that I'm still more open to I do try to challenge myself with things like, you
Right.
know, I, again, I don't believe everything that I mean, there's some politicians I've liked over the years, but I didn't necessarily trust them or believe them,
Right.
and I also didn't necessarily think that my teachers union was always truthful either. Like, so I'm willing to say like both sides, like I didn't trust the administration, but I also didn't
Yes.
trust the union. So I mean,
Yes.
like they are all. I mean, again, that's the name of the podcast. They're all lying to us. Like there is everybody has an internal motivation to keep what they have, and whether it's a union, whether it's a race, whether it's it's a party, whether it's a political position, like we all like that's we're I don't know. I think that if we go back to Springfield, a lot of what this is that the folks that are very upset about these Haitian migrants, and this is any community, many of them I think are afraid that their views and or ideology of what their town was is changing. It's not going to be what it once was.
Well, I guess,
Um,
and the oddity of this maybe is that, I mean, the challenges that that town is facing because of the inundation of just people,
right.
and maybe there's added issues because they're immigrant people, because now a lot of them speak Haitian Creole, and that changes
Yep.
the school dynamic, and the school has to accommodate that. There's a lot of need for different types of services that stretches the community and the local government budgets, and maybe even charity budgets and things like that. So the stupid story about eating cats and dogs is really, um, I'm not trying to point this into a good thing, but it's kind of unfortunate that that's how a real important issue is actually come to light. I had no idea of the existence of it before Trump started talking about, Haitians eating cats and dogs, stealing your neighbor's cat and eating it, eating it for breakfast.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And this sad thing is that that's how we find out about something that's actually an important issue that both sides need to figure out how to deal with, with those things. And because
This is a, I
I
mean,
don't think it's not a
immigration.
one time or one location event here. This is a bigger event than that.
Immigration is, I mean, this country is based on immigration. And if you go back to the, I was watching Morning Joe today, and I watched that show with like a dose of salt at times. But John Leguizamo, who's a very talented actor, has a documentary coming out about kind of Hispanics and kind of how just kind of their plight. I'm very interested in the take on it because I feel like whether it's been legal, whether it's been Hispanics, whether it's been Native Americans, whether it's been Italians coming to the United States, whether it's been the Irish coming to the United States. It's funny, like many of these groups that have come, once they kind of got their clout, were kind of forgot that they used to be the organization that didn't, the immigrant population that didn't have that clout. And then other races can even years, 100 years later, are still being treated poorly. And there's still things that are going on. It's like, I think that's always going to be the nature of of America. America will always be this place that people want to go because of the opportunities that it can have. But then there's also the sad part of it is that we also don't want, we don't want this at times. Like many people don't want, they are unwilling to accept the fact that the 50s were great for some people, yes, but there was a whole bunch of people in this country that the 50s were not good for, by gender, by sexual orientation, by race, by religion. But we act like the 50s were this like perfect utopian society that we had after World War II. And it's just not true. It's just simply not true. But there are people that think that really was, because for whatever their parents or grandparents at this point, or great grandparents, that was things were great. Were they? Like I can find 20 people that will tell you that wasn't the case. But there is that illusion.
Well, I think you mentioned an important word before, which is the compromise. And I think on immigration, we just can never come to terms with it, right? And I think we need to think about things there's a finite limit. There's some number that we should carve out and say, yes, this is an appropriate number. And then put in some methodology and things like that, because I do think that the groups need to make a faster effort to meld into the population in terms of, learning English, doing those sorts of things. I think that's what should be asked of the immigrants to
Sure.
when they come in. And I think
if you're unemployed, you are expected to look for a job to collect your unemployment.
right.
So there's nothing wrong in my mind that if you accept immigration, that there's an expectation that you're going to be taking. No one's saying that you can't continue to speak your native language, but we're saying to operate within this country, there's an expectation. If you're going to receive financial aid and or whatever, that you do need to acclimate a little bit to the United States and learn to speak English. So we would appreciate it that if you're an adult, because obviously your children, if they're going to a public school, are going to be taught English. We expect you to take an English literacy, learn to be able to communicate in English. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. No one's saying that you can't celebrate, your Haitian religion or holidays or your language. Keep your language, because obviously Italians like us, my generation, we stopped speaking Italian because we needed, that was an over, that wasn't like, many Italians from my parents and grandparents generation, like they cut off, no one speaks Italian anymore because we need to acclimate to this country, because we're treated differently because we have this thick accent. Later generations that have come can keep their origins, but they also can communicate. There's things like, I agree. I think that there should be some give and take expectations of things, but there also has to be an expectation that this country needs immigration. We need immigration because there's a lot of jobs that nobody is willing to do because we just don't think we're above that for whatever reason. But we also have to make sure that those people are not manipulated and that they're paid a fair wage,
and that they're not, because we tend to do these things easily and take advantage of, the fact that those workers come into certain jobs that are unpopular may also disadvantage American workers who are already here, who may want those jobs too, but maybe they want it less because the job pays
my point.
Pays
the
so
compromise
crappy too, right?
Is that,
so
right.
And like that's the problem with a lot of this immigration stuff, is that and a lot of things is that a certain group comes up with the rule, but there's another group, usually at the lower end of the economic totem pole, and on the lower end of the economic scale, that takes the bigger hit from it, directly, indirectly, and it's certainly perceived that way. And that's all part of, it should be all part of the formula that goes into making the next great restructuring of the immigration plan. But I don't know that it's feasible to round up 10 million people. I don't know. I just, like I said, I just think the circumstances like the ones that happened in Springfield, Ohio, are ones that probably have to be looked at and say, how do we deal with those kind of impacts when such a large influx goes to one spot? And I don't know if it's some immigrants do get a little bit of money when they are resettled here. It's a lot less money and a lot less people than everybody seems to think it is, I believe, in the real world. But there is some, part of that is so that they can have money to put into the communities in which they move into. So I think some allocation of resources towards those communities who take on that burden, whether directly to the immigrant and moreover to the governments that have to provide the services, both in schools and other, utilities and what have you that go along with servicing that population. They need to have that. They can't be sitting there and bearing the brunt of it.
Right. And one of the things that, I'm no fan of the governor of Texas, but he was trying to make a point at one point, the way he was like shipping immigrants, which I thought was terrible. But he decided that was a way he could draw attention to the plight that he feels that Texas is up against. And right. I don't like the approach, but I understand why he did it. I don't agree with but he was trying to make a point. He's like, okay, yeah, it's easy for you people up in the north that don't have this influx of immigration, that aren't dealing with it, to, that in our border towns and whatever. And I don't know that, I've not been to the border, so I don't know how accurate it is, but I can certainly believe that these communities are adversely impacted by this. And he was trying to say that you folks up in the north, okay, well, let's send some of them your way. And there probably needs to be in the reforms of immigration, a plan so that, these border states aren't expected to house everybody.
And I think that's what I was saying about in the true refugee asylee process, which is a structured one where they plan on it. We had a bunch of countries in Europe, we had the US all agreeing to take for example, a certain amount of Syrian refugees. These
Right.
are usually more structured, and they usually find communities who want to take on the population, and need a boost of younger, new generation of people, so that they have people to render services to an aging population, for example, or to work on farms or in certain of those types of jobs. And it's kind of done structured, but it's hard. It's very hard to do it at scale if it's 1 million people coming in a year from, Mexico, because we already have probably about 1 million coming in, becoming permanent residents every year, who are um, who are doing it through other legal means, whether it's
From
through
simple economic,
employers, family, marriage, whatever, those kind of things. And the asylee refugee is just one component of ways that people come here. But when it's done through the regular formal process, which starts outside the US, it doesn't start by somebody sneaking
right.
across a border town in Mexico, from Mexico into Texas or Arizona or California. It can be done fairly structured, and it can be distributed more evenly. So I think if there's some acknowledgement that, hey, we should accept some of these folks, I think the program that supports it should also distribute it so that those border places are not alone in bearing the
There's
burden.
lots of ways too that you could have paths to citizenships as well. Like, I mean, for example, one of the shortages we have in the United States now is people that want to join the military. So why
Mhm.
can't you have a path to citizenship for immigration?
I believe there
Like,
are sometimes that there are some programs. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I know there are a fair number of people who do join the military, and I think they may be able to eventually get status. We had some people that we overpromised to, like in Afghanistan and things like that, that we didn't deliver on, that we were
right,
supposed to give status to as well, and we kind of left some of them high and dry after they were aiding us in whatever it was we were trying to do over there.
right.
And so it can become quite difficult. I'll say, to kind of manage those sorts of processes, and that's part of the reason why I think the numbers should be looked at, and appropriately set appropriate levels, so that it's not we're not overwhelmed. A single town isn't overwhelmed. A single location, a single part of the country isn't overwhelmed, and the country as a whole isn't overwhelmed, so that it can properly absorb these people. So I
Right.
don't think a full open door policy is. I don't think either candidate's talking about that now. Certainly not Mr. Trump. But I don't know that it's not as simple answers. Let's put it that way. But I think if you come at it from the side of, well, we have to be sympathetic to everyone, versus we have to not allow anybody in and throw everybody who's here illegally out. There's a lot of ground to cover on those two to come to the middle in terms of a compromise. So we'll see if it ever. I don't have much. It's having done immigration law as an attorney. I don't have much faith in the system ever being able to put together a law. Again, which brings us back to, why are we so, all these reasons why there's two different perspectives and everybody's so divided on it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard to cut through it.
Yeah,
So, any event, I'm thinking we're going to call that a wrap for today. I think we
definitely.
talked a lot about that division in America and how it shows up in our political debate. We talked a lot about immigration and how that kind of comes into play. We have about 2 months left, about 8 weeks or so, I guess, left to an election. So we'll keep following up on stuff. Rich, do you think there's, we talked about these things, and we talk about issues. We get into issues sometimes, and I do want to talk about issues and how both candidates think about them, or what the issues are. So, because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings out there. So I'd like to, on issues that I know about, like to be able to share that. On issues that I don't, maybe do a little bit of research and share that with people on these
Right.
shows. But I always wonder, as I think about doing those things, I'm like, does it really matter for people like, for purposes of this election, for people really to be informed or not? Because like we said, the debate, everything kind of goes off the rails. We end up with these wacky stories. Is there value still in still trying to figure out going back to these issues, or do we just talk about Taylor Swift and eating cats and dogs and stuff like that?
I guess my last point on all of this is that I feel like, again, it's stupid because I live in New York State and it doesn't matter if I vote. Like, let's be honest.
Right.
But I will vote. But I wish that, like, there are things that I want to hear from a candidate, whether it's a senator, my mayor, my president who's running. I want to hear what I want to be able to I'm never going to vote for someone just because they happen to be a party. So in my mind, you have to tell me why you are going to do what your ideas are on X, Y, and Z. And, in future elections, I'm hoping that I have two candidates that I am willing to listen to both of what they have to say, that are both reasonable people. In this specific election, like, there are some things that if she, I'm not supporting Trump on principle. A question for Harris, there are some things that I want to hear more about, and not just because she's not him. I want to know what she wants to do about certain things. And then I think there's a lot of folks that are going to make a decision whether they're going to vote for him or her based on those informations, and not just, whatever. That I used to work in McDonald's or whatever, these stupid things that people decide make you electable. And I think that's kind of that's why I think, yes, to answer your question, yes, these things do matter, because there's enough of us that do want someone to come in that actually gets the plight of Americans, not just certain Americans, all Americans, and is willing to try to do their best to address the needs of everyone.
Well said. You have my vote.
Okay, good luck with that.
But I wouldn't wish you being elected to a position on you, because I like you too much. So
Yeah, well, thank you.
yeah, in any event, well, hey, that's it for today, September 12th. Tune in. We should expect to be back in 2 weeks on September 26th. September 26th with our next edition. You can find us at lyingtous.com, where you can find other episodes of our podcasts and also some of our blog posts. And you can find our podcasts on Spotify, Apple, the usual places you might look for them. And also you can get our video podcast on the wonderful YouTube channel. Look for Lying to Us channel on YouTube and you will find us there. So everyone, think clearly. Try to get along with your fellow American. Try to think outside of your own box. Try to get familiar with the other perspectives. Look for different perspectives on TV, on podcasts, and other places. And don't just, of course, just don't listen to me on these things. But I would say go out and expand your horizons a little bit. We're all being forced into narrow zones. It's pushing us apart. And there's nothing I'd like more. And I think you'll find it beneficial to see that, there's a sense I might disagree with that person, but I think it might be helpful to know that, hey, we're somewhat still in this together. And there's some points of agreement I can find with almost anybody in this country. So maybe we can have a little change of heart here and see if we can find those points of agreement rather than all those points of disagreement. In any event, everybody have a good day, a good couple weeks, and we'll be back with you then. Thanks much. See ya.